Hi, I'm Erika of the Knit Kind podcast and Grapefruit and Gardenia Designs. You can find me on Ravelry as Knitty Elf 40, where you can find details for the projects that I'm going to talk about today, as well as other projects that I have done or find my patterns. I am wearing a pattern by Thea Coleman called Cranberry Capelet, and it is knitted in Malabrigo Rios, which is a worsted weight yarn, a superwash merino. It is in the color Cereza, and I knitted this specifically for the Christmas holidays, but I didn't finish it for Christmas last year. I think I finished it for Valentine's Day. So it's a long poncho with ribbing all around. It has beautiful drape. It's a nice size. It has obviously some stretch to it, ribbing all the way around, a cable down the front, a cable down the back, and some short rows. And then the neck is shaped as well with, I believe, a different needle size if I recall, but I get stopped around the holidays for this one all of the time. People really love that this is a really festive looking piece. It's not a sweater. You can throw it over things when you don't want that jacket and you're going in and out of stores or doing your errands this time of year. So I really love it and highly recommend this pattern to anyone who's interested. So obviously I am in a Christmas festive spirit. We're going to talk about stockings that you can see behind me. Have my tree set up this year. But for those of you who celebrate other holidays, Hanukkah is starting. Happy Hanukkah. Whatever your traditions are, or whatever religion, culture you are, I hope that this is a time of year to reflect if you're on our calendar year or if you're mid-year celebrating something. Just really reflect on where everyone is, show people more patience, empathy, kindness. For many of us, it's a celebratory time. There's a lot of things going on in the world, obviously, and always that are difficult, whether that is on a personal level or a global scale. So if we can all take the time to wish for more peace, good health, good relations, I think that is what we can do. And I saw recently someone had posted something about someone saying one person can't make a difference, said only 60 million people. And so I like to think about that whenever you have a moment that you think you can't make a difference, and think more about the Margaret Mead quote, which is never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens, citizens or individuals. I'm going to start over. I wrote down the one that I found. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So I think during this season, as we take time to reflect, for many of us who have school-age children, they're going to be out of school. And so often the focus can turn to material things and the pressure to get things done. And the more we can focus on what I hold true to my values as the things that really matter, I think the more of a difference we can make in the world. So just a little thought to leave you with before we get into too much knitting. So I told you what I'm wearing today. And I want to show you, so I don't forget before I get into the Christmas stocking episode, what I am working on and a recently finished project. I always wait till the end for some reason. So I have blocked this and I photographed it, but I haven't trimmed my ends yet. I recently held an Aquinnah Cowl workshop at my local library, and I always like to have some samples on the needles to show people. I have swatches and sometimes a sample. So I finished my jewel tone Aquinnah Cowl, and this one is in the colorways Lotus for the variegated and green gray for this tealish color. And I really am smitten with the way that they blended at the top. I recommend low contrast for this pattern. This is one of my patterns. And I didn't know how these two are going to work up. You want a little bit of contrast down here so you can see the two color honeycomb and the slip stitches, but then you don't want so much contrast that it looks, unless you want that look, really kind of zebra striped. You want it to kind of be mottled. So I loved how this one turned out. And I knitted this one on size 11 needles on the bottom and size 10.5 needles on the top. And before it's blocked, it really, you go, oh my goodness, is this gonna work? Because it's a looser gauge here, a tighter gauge here, and it can kind of bunch funny. But once it's blocked and pinned out, it fits gorgeous. It's just barely over the shoulders, depending of course on your size, and then you can also wear it not over the shoulders and just drape down. And in order to be able to do that on the bottom, you really, in most cases, need to work it on an 11. And then the top, depending on how snug or not you like it, you can work it at higher stitch count, lower stitch count, bigger needles, smaller needles. You can make it taller or shorter. So those are all in there. But that is my finished object off the needles. And my whip, I had shown you, which is work in progress. I had shown you a hat that I started and had hibernating because I decided not to finish the exact pattern I had started. So I started with 120 stitches cast on for a very thick brim, and I found this Ferguson pattern, it's called Ferguson, and that pattern called for 144 stitch circumference. So actually I looked at a few other patterns, and I also know I like hats to fit snug right here, and for the color work I could, it's gonna pull in a little maybe, so you could size up a needle and have more stitches. So all I did was I thought about working it at 120 stitches, which still would have worked because it was a 24 stitch repeat for the color work, but I decided just to do an increase. I put in a lifeline right here, and I kept going. And I don't think I've actually done fingering weight color work before, and I was a little skeptical that I was gonna like it, but I am hooked. Look at this color work. It's gorgeous. And so it uses obviously a high contrast for the white or natural color with whatever your main color is. And then it suggests a low contrast color. So if you can see here, I'm trying to get it so you can see the color. I had gifted to me a mini skein that has blue and green and just a little tiny bit of sparkle. And I thought that would be the perfect use. So my Ferguson hat is really the only active project I have on the needles right now, although I have a few that I am just trying to decide how and when to cast on. So that is that project. And I'm also opening a yarn countdown calendar, so I might do that in another one, because when it comes to holidays and all of us wanting to be festive, it's one of those things that I don't splurge on every year, but some years I do. And I did this year. So I'll tell you more about that later. I want to get into the Christmas stocking specifically topic, and this is going to be edited a little bit. I had my parents here on Thanksgiving, and I had them bring some of the Christmas stockings that my grandmother had made over the years. And actually this one right here is mine that she made probably around 1977 when I was born, which my mom gave up in her interview, so I'm not giving up my age. It's gonna come up anyway. This is the one I made for my husband, and I might bring them down and show them close up, but they are in the other sections that we're gonna cut and paste. And those are not handmade right now, but that's my son's and our kitties. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit just about the tradition of knitting Christmas stockings, not historically, but currently for families and what it means, because I think a lot of times as knitters, we will gift knit and we want to have that person's reaction when we give them whatever it is fulfill what we are trying to do, which is share with them a love of something that we have that demonstrates our love for that person. And people often will not necessarily feel that reciprocated in the way that they had hoped. And sometimes people get really stuck on that in the moment. And it's the type of thing to reflect on, that some people in the moment will give you exactly the reaction that you were hoping. And some people won't. And sometimes it takes a long time for someone to appreciate something because of the busyness in their lives, right? Remember, if you're, especially a lot of you are probably gifting to grandchildren or great-grandchildren or great nieces and nephews. And when you're young and you're in that busy moment, you don't always have that same reflection that you might have later in life. So one of the things you'll see when we interview my mom, we, I think, did 5 takes. And it might seem like we're a little bit stiff in the one that we finally show, and that's because she was getting so emotional, and she's not necessarily comfortable showing that online, right? Or, you know, people, we live in New England. A lot of people are very reserved with their emotions. Well, that is what knitters want to see, right? Like, you might not want somebody to cry when you give them a gift, but maybe you do. But that is what doing these gifts and giving these gifts has over time. When someone's gone, or when someone can't knit anymore, or when some time has just gone by and people have a chance to slow down and reflect, I think that is when people appreciate things even more. And it might be that they learned to knit and they thought, oh my goodness, I thought, you know, my grandmother was just bored and that's all she had to do with her time, and she sat there and knitted and gave us things. And then they realize how long it takes to knit something, and the fact that it's not something people do just because they're bored or they need a purpose in life. They do it because they want to show you how much you mean to them. I have a little bit of a cold. I'm probably also getting a little bit emotional, but I think that's something to just give a pause and remember that if you feel like you're giving a gift and it's not received in the way you want. It doesn't mean everybody's going to love it. It doesn't mean nobody's going to give something to Goodwill. That's going to happen too. But, you know, it might just take a little bit longer for someone to process what something does mean to them. So going back now to stockings and why I wanted to do something specifically talking about them, it's because if you're celebrating Christmas, there's always going to be that stocking. It's not going to be a sweater that someone outgrows, or a sock they wear a hole in, and, you know, or a hat that they never felt good in on their skin, or a shawl that they say, I don't even know how to style this, right? So Christmas stockings are something that are pretty universally liked. So if you're looking for something to gift to someone, don't spend your time if they want to have the one from the certain boutique that they put up there. They're not going to put yours up there just because. So check with them first if you're unsure. But if it's somebody who you think will treasure it, even if it's not the one they hang on the mantle every year, think about giving them that. Or for that matter, another thing for their home. Maybe it's a pillow that goes on their couch or their bed. Something that they can have to always remember you by while you're here and after you're gone. I think that's a lovely way to do it, to share your love of knitting and fiber arts with someone, and it might not be someone who would wear something. So I thought I would plant that seed as well. What I wanted to talk about a little bit today is the history of these, and I'm going to cut to the video of my mom and my dad when we do some of that. And I wanted to also share some ideas for stockings that I have seen that I thought might appeal to you. So first, sometimes people want a little Ravelry help. How do I look for Christmas stockings in Ravelry? I don't see it just as something I can check. You want to go to Ravelry, to the advanced search function, to the category of home. When you're looking at categories, you have sweaters, hat, accessories. You want to look for the category home. There is a subcategory called Decorative, and within that there is Christmas stockings. There are in Ravelry, as of today, 4,139 patterns. 2,668 of them are knitted, 1,440 of them are crocheted, and the rest are done on looms or machines. So here's a few I wanted to highlight. And I would say my personal style is really more around something that is classic, and it might be classic and traditional, or it might be classic and modern. But it feels like something that you could have no matter when, and it's always going to be attractive or appealing. So I will start with probably the most classic of them, and I'm going to insert some pictures here rather than try to hold up a screen. There is a series from Annie's Woolens, and she has an ebook, or you can buy the patterns individually. There is also what I would say is leaning now a little bit more toward classic modern, a holiday doodle stocking by Jamie Lomax, and that is in a DK weight yarn. There is a Nordic stocking by Margaret Mills, a Santa's Chimney stocking by Mary Dominski, and the last one I wanted to highlight is, I think, although I haven't read a lot about this, the most modern looking to me, or contemporary. I would say contemporary more than modern. But it also may have a tradition that I just haven't read about. So if the designer's watching this and that's the case, maybe you can respond and we can do a little bit of back and forth or a little interview on that, is the Lindell stocking by Ona Walton. I hope I'm saying that right. So if you remember this summer, I did the Junction Fiber Mill knit along with making tracks for the Lindell Torkel. This is in that same line. She has a handbag, she has Christmas stocking, she has scarves and shawls, a skirt. So this is in that same one where it's shaped by short rows, and you use the making tracks, and then you'll have this unpredictability of exactly how it's going to come out, but you can choose your colorways for something similar, and they have kits on their website right now. And I just thought that was something that I could see if you were starting to make a whole series for your family. You could make them in all different colors, and that would be so cool. So I wanted to share those as recommendations, even though, to be clear, I don't think I've knitted any of them. So I'm not endorsing the quality of the pattern. I am just highlighting ones that when I searched, I had saved in my favorites or had caught my eye as ones that I might want to have that I would potentially want to make for someone someday. So I want to talk a little bit about the ones behind me. And I think what I will do is go get them down and come back and record more. Okay, I'm back. I have taken down the two stockings that were behind me that I wanted to show you. This one is the one that my grandmother knitted for me. And as a child, I just loved that the Angora was for the beard. This is a pattern by Busilla, and you can still get this through an Etsy shop. I don't think you can get it anymore through Busilla. As far as I've seen, I don't know if their knitting pattern business retired and they sold the rights to this person. It looks like there's still some embroidery from the company, so I am curious to learn a little bit more. I think they're 150 years old from what I saw online. But this is my Santa in the Chimney stocking that was knitted for me in the mid to late 70s. Moon on the back, sequins on the front, knitted flat on long needles, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the segment I did with my mom, with intarsia, a duplicate stitch for the name. It does have a heel and a gusset, but again, it's obviously knitted completely differently than when you're knitting in the round. It took me a while to find that pattern because I just always remember my grandmother with Mary Maxim patterns. She did the little ornaments, there were penguins. She did so many of the stockings, which I'll insert a picture here. I remember and she would put them also on children's vests and sweaters. There was one with a wreath and a teddy bear hanging from it. There was one with Rudolph. There's the one that my brother has for his, which has trains and rocking horses. I need to take a sip of water. And just many different ones. And so because I always remembered her with those patterns, I assumed that this Santa one was also, because there was a Santa Mary Maxim pattern, but this one was different. It took me quite a while to track down when I was a new knitter. It would have probably been easier for me to find it now. But anyway, it's this Busilla pattern that I'll insert. And this is the one that when I started knitting, I knitted for my husband for a surprise for, I think maybe even the first, I bet it was the first Christmas that I was a knitter. So I learned to knit in January-ish, January, I think, of 2018. And I chose this as something that he wouldn't have to wear. I knitted it. I was very proud of this little picot edge that you tack down, because when you're a new knitter, you're constantly, there's so many new things to learn always and still. And so that was, I thought, a neat little detail. I don't know if I had done intarsia at that point or not. I said I hadn't, but it's all running together. I'd have to actually look. So this is actually all duplicate stitch. And I really did like the letter chart that they had. So it actually turned out to be quite large. I don't know if it was supposed to be that, or I wasn't really paying attention to gauge. But anyway, I like it. It hangs up there. He's got his stocking, and I think this is a Leisure Arts pattern. I will double check. And of course it's linked in my Ravelry projects. But I believe I actually had one of those. I remember going into my local yarn store and saying, did they have any stocking patterns? Which is funny. I'm not totally sure why I didn't just look on Ravelry, but maybe I wanted to support the local yarn store or just wanted some suggestions because I hadn't knitted a stocking before, a sock. Anyway, this is the one I ended up getting, and I'm happy with it. And it's, like I said, it's large. He gets to fill it all the time. In terms of what yarn I used, so I would say here, it's really going to be personal preference. I think this is maybe one of the very few places that I might still default to a high-end acrylic yarn. And the reason for that, for me, is because, number one, it's not going anywhere, right? You want this to be around forever. So from a practical point of view, it's not something that's going to get used for a year and trashed, hopefully. The other reason is because it is stored most of the year. So I would knit them in wool, and there are some patterns that I mentioned specifically, like the Lindell stocking. And also, I think there is a nice tradition of knitting Christmas stockings in wool. Having said that, if you do it, please don't forego that step at the end of the Christmas season when it's been hanging in your house and gathering skin cells and gathering dust. And it is like an attractive dinner for a moth when you store it away, if you just fold it up and put it in with your other decorations that get stored all year. Take the time to wash it and let it fully dry so you don't have any issues with it getting any mold or mildew. And then when it's fully dried, nicely package it up, put in a lavender sachet or some cedar, and put it in a sealed plastic container. That would be my recommendation, but I know there's a lot of mixed feelings on things like that. So I would just say you don't want all that hard work to go and then you open it the next year and it's full of moth holes. So if you do it in wool, take care of it. And it might be one of those places that even if you are someone who 99.9% of the time wants to knit with natural materials, which is probably where I am, it might be the case that this is the exception that you make. I will say, just in terms of, as a talking point, this is incredibly soft acrylic yarn. It is, I don't even think they make this exact one anymore, but it was by Premier, and it was like a Deborah Norville line specifically. So I think they still make the anti-pilling line, but I don't think it's this soft anymore. Haven't bought it since then, but I seem to recall that. So anyway, those are the two stockings that I wanted to show you. would you like to introduce yourself to the Knit Kind world?
Yes, I would. My name is Liz, and I'm Erika's mother. And these beautiful Christmas stockings you see behind us were created by my mother for the family.
Okay, so that's who made the stockings. And do you remember when either you received them or your kids received them?
Well, yes, I do. When my husband and I got married in 1970, and that's when my mother thought we should have our own Christmas stockings to hang up. And at the time, she was now retired, and she had more time to knit. And what she did, I'm from a family of 5 children, so what she did for one, she would do for all the children, all the grandchildren. But the interesting part is this is the one she made for me. But my husband... My husband was a basketball coach, so she just loved the fact that she somehow came across, and I don't know how, this pattern. I don't believe it was her own pattern, but she got such a joy out of making a basketball sneaker Christmas stocking for him, and he was so surprised when he got it.
Converse Chuck Taylor.
Yeah, because at the time, that's what kids were wearing to play basketball, with a high top Chuck Taylor basketball sneakers.
And high socks.
And very high socks, correct.
So the top is knitted and the bottom is crocheted.
Crocheted, right. And also, now the last one is for once I started having children. Erika came first in 1977, and so she made Erika's to mimic mine exactly. And then my son was born in 1984, so she immediately had to come up with a stocking for him, and she liked to add things to the stockings that personalized it, like the train. Little boys loved the trains, and also he had a rocking horse, and he loved that, so that's what she chose to put on his stocking.
And I probably won't talk too much about it now, but while these stockings are here, so you can hear me, we have one microphone over here today. This one is a Mary Maxim pattern, and you can tell that it was knitted flat. So I always remember my grandmother knitting on the long, straight needles. I never remember her having rounded ones,
no.
But I think you said she might have for Afghans.
For Afghans,
because
correct.
It was so heavy. But you can see on this one where it's seamed, right here. And so these would have been knitted flat and seamed, and they do have a gusset on them. This one, same thing. You can see the seam in here. We all like to look at construction on the inside. And a mix of intarsia and some duplicate stitch. So the Santa design would have been intarsia, which was something she was really good at and did on all of our sweaters. And then the name looks like it was duplicate stitched afterwards. And this one is a pattern I think I found by Busilla, which is no longer in business, but someone has the rights to their patterns and sells them through Etsy. And we've never been able to find the Chuck Taylor pattern. So I thought I'd ask you a few other questions about Christmas traditions growing up. One is, what kind of stockings did you have growing up? Because these were all made after you were married.
Right. Well, ours were much simpler. I think, like, if you think of something that was probably purchased in the 5 and 10, they were just like cloth, and they would have an imprint of maybe Santa Claus on them. And then always your name would be added later with a marker or whatever. Your parents would put your name on them. Very simple and very much smaller, so they wouldn't hold so many prizes.
And then, do you remember what kind of gifts were put into them growing up?
Yes. What I remember is I loved dolls, so I would always get like little plastic dolls for the dollhouse. And also, the thing all of us seemed to look forward to was these books that look like
lifesavers.
Lifesavers.
I think we had those when I was really young too, but I think you said they had 10 packages in yours, and I think they maybe had 4 or 5 by the time we were young. But I remember, you'd get maybe some flavors that you didn't always get.
Exactly.
Or something like that. So I know, again, growing up, it's amazing that they're not too distorted in shape because there was always a big piece of fruit in the bottom of everyone's. And I was wondering if you had the fruit in the toes when you were growing up.
I don't remember any fruit in the toes, no.
I think I read a little bit about the tradition of it, so I don't know. I'll have to maybe put that in the video somewhere else to film them while they were here. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
You enjoyed your premiere on
I did.
Kind. Well, it took us a few takes to get it, but we did it.
Okay, now...
Okay, so this is your premiere on Knit Kind. Would you like to say who you are?
I'm Glenn. I'm Erika's dad and Liz's husband, who's also been on this podcast.
And your mother was?
Alice Bergman Field.
And we have established that your mother was a knitter.
Yes, she was.
And knitted a lot of the clothes for our Cabbage Patch Kids to go to your basketball games so they could be wearing DR Falcon.
Absolutely.
Clothes.
I can recall a picture in the Attleboro Sun of you holding like 4 Cabbage Patch Kids, all with knitted clothing on.
Yeah, and we'll have to look up which player, if you might remember, had the shot that went around and around and around the rim before it went in. That was the picture. I was holding them all with my jaw wide open.
I can't recall what that was, but
probably mid 1980s, maybe late 1980s. So we have shown your Christmas stocking. Do you want to tell us what you remember about receiving it?
I remember getting it from my mother-in-law, was a very special lady, Priscilla Hopkins, who knitted profusely, and I absolutely love that. It's now over 50 years old, and I cherish it. It's a perfect example of the time when I played basketball, and I know sneakers have evolved quite a bit, and those were the days when everybody, including the NBA, played in Converse All-Star high tops.
And how did you feel about the fact that the the shoe was already stuffed? So you got things from here to here.
Yeah, that was a little concerning because every year I never quite got as much in that stocking as one would think looking at the size of it.
How did the size compare to your actual foot?
Probably fairly accurate. It looks like it's about a size 13.
And you have on your Northeastern shirt here, which is where you played basketball in college.
Correct.
So do you remember when you were in college going home and seeing my grandmother's knitting, or were they not knitting as much because they were still working at that point?
She was knitting whenever she had the time, but not nearly as much as she did once she stopped working.
Okay, well, what do you remember about Christmas stockings when you were a child?
Not a real lot, honestly.
Do you remember if you had them?
I believe we did, yes.
Do you remember anything that you used to get in them?
Candy and fruit and
so you got fruit.
Small things. Yeah, I got fruit.
So maybe
and that's always been a tradition. It seems like at the end of that stocking, it's quite frequently an orange or some piece of
fruit.
Spherical fruit.
Nobody got bananas?
No, no bananas.
Okay. So maybe that tradition came down through the Santa on the Swedish side of the family, possibly?
Perhaps,
do you think?
Yes.
We don't think it came from the Hopkins side of the family, so we were trying to figure that out earlier. And do you remember anything about the others of us getting our stockings?
No, I just remembered how nice it was to see them hung on the mantle by the fireplace with the names on them.
Okay, well, that's it for your interview. Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure.
Okay.
The tradition of putting an orange in the toe of a stocking has numerous origin stories. One, published by Smithsonian Magazine, refers to the Bishop of Myra, who was seen throwing 3 balls of gold through a window that provided the dowry to 3 poverty-stricken maidens in an altarpiece that was painted between 1433 and 1435 in Florence. That tradition shows that the balls of gold landed conveniently by the fire in a stocking where they were dried. Another more modern take is that during the Great Depression, Santa would leave oranges in the toe of a stocking as something that was both more affordable yet also considered a luxury at the time. This tradition continues in our family, and I hope perhaps it does in yours or that you have your own special traditions. Merry Christmas.